Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great show for you tonight. Roger and Sheriff Christie will be appearing from Hilo, Hawaii, talking about their work for the spiritual use of cannabis and how the federal government put them through an ordeal that is ongoing, and actually said this man who had no criminal history, possession of just about a pound of marijuana, he was held for almost 5 years as a danger to his community. And we'll be interviewing him and his wife Cher. We have our hemp news segment as well, so stay tuned as we bring on our infamous Dancing Cannabis Leaves.
I feel the force.
Our first story tonight is from Washington, D.C. Members of the U.S. House of Representatives voted earlier this week on Tuesday, December 15th, in favor of H.R. 3797, the Medical Marijuana Research Act, which facilitates clinical cannabis research by establishing a process so that authorized scientists may access flowers and other products manufactured in accordance with state-approved marijuana programs. It also ends the decades-long monopoly on the cultivation of cannabis for FDA-approved research by requiring federal agencies to license multiple manufacturers in addition to the University of Mississippi. For over 5 decades, the University of Mississippi has been the only federally licensed source of research-grade marijuana in the United States. This act is sponsored by our own Representative Earl Blumenauer from Portland, Oregon, along with several Republican co-sponsors. House members passed the act on a voice vote. Congressman Blumenauer said today on the House floor, quote, "At a time when there are 4 million registered medical cannabis patients and many more likely self-medicate, when there are 91% of Americans supporting medical cannabis, it's time to change the system. This bill will do precisely that," end quote. These common sense regulatory changes are necessary and long overdue. The DEA has proven time and time again that it is not an honest broker when it comes to overseeing the cultivation of research-grade cannabis. Despite promising over 4 years ago to expand the pool of federal licensees permitted to provide cannabis for clinical research, the agency has steadfastly refused to do so, leaving scientists with woefully inadequate supplies of cannabis and cannabis products available for human studies. These federally licensed products do not represent the type or quality of cannabis products currently available in legal statewide markets. The reality that most high schoolers have easier access to cannabis than do our nation's top scientists is a height of absurdity and an indictment of the current system. Under the existing regulatory system, there is only one federally licensed entity, the University of Mississippi, that's permitted to cultivate and provide marijuana for use in FDA-approved clinical studies. Scientists have consistently criticized the poor quality of the university's plants, which they say fail to accurately reflect the varieties of marijuana commercially available in the United States. According to the federal government's marijuana menu, scientists may currently select from no more than 6 varieties of pre-rolled cannabis cigarettes, none of which possess THC concentrations above 7%. or CBD concentrations above 1%. Other types of cannabis-infused products like tinctures and concentrates are not available for clinical study. Nonetheless, the current system does not permit scientists to access state-licensed marijuana products as part of an FDA-approved protocol. In 2016, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency pledged to expand the pool of federally licensed entities permitted to grow cannabis, but to date, the agency has failed to act on more than 30 applications before it. The Marijuana Research Act would permit an unlimited number of federally licensed entities to participate in this space. Today's floor vote comes on the heels of the lower chamber on Friday, voting in favor of the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement, or MORE Act, H.R. 3884, which removes marijuana from the Federal Controlled Substances Act, thereby eliminating the existing conflict between state and federal marijuana laws and providing states with the authority to establish their own cannabis laws free from undue federal interference. Both of these have passed the United States House of Representatives, but they will not pass the United States Senate, and they'll have to come up again starting in a few weeks when the next congressional session begins. The next story is from Boston, Massachusetts. The enactment of statewide laws legalizing and regulating the use and sale of marijuana by adults is not associated with an uptick in cannabis use by young people, according to data published in the Journal of Adolescent Health. A team of investigators with Boston College analyzed marijuana use data from a nationally representative sample of more than 1 million high school students over an 18-year period. The authors found no evidence that recreational marijuana legalization was associated with an increased likelihood or level of marijuana use among adolescents. Rather, among adolescents who reported any use of marijuana in the past month, the frequency of use has declined by 16% after real marijuana legalization. These add to the growing body of scientific literature showing that legalization policies can be implemented in a manner that provides access for adults while simultaneously limiting youth access and misuse. Furthermore, these findings stand in sharp contrast to the sensationalist claims often made by legalization opponents, claims that thus far have proven to be baseless, that this would send the wrong message to kids. Data compiled last month by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported that the number of adolescents admitted to drug treatment programs for marijuana-related issues has fallen precipitously in states that have legalized and regulated the adult use marijuana market. In addition, a 2019 study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association's Pediatrics Journal similarly concluded, quote, marijuana use among youth may actually decline after legalization for recreational purposes. This latter result is consistent with the argument that it is more difficult for teenagers to obtain marijuana as drug dealers are replaced by licensed dispensaries that require proof of age, end quote. In another study that's been ongoing for decades, self-reported rates of lifetime marijuana use by young people remain largely unchanged over the past year and has not increased over the better part of the last decade, according to survey data released by the University of Michigan. Year over year, quote, the use of marijuana in all forms by adolescents nationwide did not significantly change in any of the three grades, 8th grade, 10th grade, or 12th grade, for lifetime use, past 12 months use, or the past 30 days use, or daily use, end quote, the National Institute on Drug Abuse stated in a news release. Since 2012, when Colorado and Washington became the first two states in the nation to legalize the retail adult use market, lifetime use by adolescents has fallen approximately 3% nationwide. Annual use by young people has remained largely unchanged during this period, while self-reported use by adolescents over the past 30 days has fallen. These 2020 findings add to the growing body of scientific literature showing that legalization policies can be implemented in a manner that provides access for adults while limiting youth access and abuse. Furthermore, these findings stand in stark contrast to the sensationalist claims that have proven to be baseless. With the new president coming into office, Joe Biden was formerly a United States senator and was one of 87 senators in 1988 who voted to authorize the creation of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, also known as the Drug Czar's office. Now it's time for Biden's new administration to abolish this agency. The Office of National Drug Control Policy represents a bygone era. Today, most Americans now agree that the adult use of marijuana ought to be legal, and the majority of states have legalized the substance for either medical or recreational use. There's no longer any legitimate need for the Drug Czar's office or for a drug czar. I remind you, back in 1988, the first drug czar was Vice President at the time, George H.W. Bush. Think about this. The White House drug czar is required by statute, quote, to oppose any attempt to legalize the use of a substance that's listed in Schedule 1 and to ensure that no federal funds shall be expended for any study or contract relating to the legalization for medical use or any other use of a substance listed in Schedule 1, like marijuana. This narrow-minded, flat earth mentality refuses to acknowledge the reality that the majority of the country is now authorized to engage in the use of cannabis, and it mandates the U.S. drug policy continue to be dictated by rhetoric and ideology rather than by science and evidence. The Biden-Harris team pledged during the campaign trail to prioritize the reform of America's failed and antiquated marijuana laws. Long term, it can follow through on this pledge by eliminating the Office of National Drug Control Policy. Short term, it can respect this pledge by rejecting the plea for appointment to the director of this agency, former Representative Patrick Kennedy, for the position of U.S. drug czar. Currently, Patrick Kennedy has openly campaigned to be the drug czar. We oppose his consideration for this appointment. Kennedy is a longtime opponent of marijuana legalization who's dedicated a tremendous amount of time, energy, and money to organize against marijuana policy reform. In fact, he co-founded with Kevin Sabet the group Smart Approaches to Marijuana, which has consistently lobbied against virtually every state and federal reform bill to legalize marijuana for either adult use or for medical use. Further, while the group claims to support decriminalizing penalties for the personal use of cannabis, it's failed to use its lobbying resources to advocate in favor of such policies in states like Virginia and in others that have done so. In 2014, Kennedy said, quote, "Incarceration is a powerful motivator," end quote, in regard to his efforts to prevent the adult consumption of cannabis. I'm asking you to join us in opposition to the appointment of Patrick Kennedy for the drug czar, and also join us calling for abolishing the Office of National Drug Control Policy. Why do we have a drug czar? A czar was a Russian emperor. Why do we have a czar in America? We should abolish the drug czar and the Office of National Drug Control Policy. Our last story tonight is from New Zealand. The administration of oral cannabinoid products holds promise in the treatment of insomnia disorders, according to findings of a systemic review of the relevant literature published in the journal CNS Drugs. A team of New Zealand researchers identified 5 studies involving 219 total subjects. Participants in the studies were administered doses of oral cannabinoids, typically THC. In the majority of the studies assessed, subjects reported improvements in their sleep quality index scores for periods of 8 weeks or longer. The authors concluded, quote, "This review is, to our knowledge, the first systemic review of a literature to examine the impact of cannabinoids on insomnia disorder. This review highlights the potential promise of cannabis-based products in the treatment of insomnia disorder. However, the evidence remains in its infancy. Further research in the form of high-quality randomized controlled trials is required before drawing any firm conclusions about the efficacy of cannabinoids in the treatment of insomnia disorder." End quote. The full text of this study, Cannabinoids in the Treatment of Insomnia Disorders, a Systemic Review and Meta-Analysis, appears in this month's edition of CNS Drugs. Personally, I have been recommending patients use oral cannabis to treat insomnia for more than a decade. Anyway, now we have our interview with Roger Christie and Cher Christie from Hilo, Hawaii. Stay tuned and help us restore hemp. Good day.
So I'd like to introduce Roger Christie, who is a longtime activist for cognitive freedom and cannabis's use as a sacrament and spiritual, along with Cher Christie. They are in a park in Hilo, Hawaii. Welcome to our show. Hi, Cher.
Thank you, Paul and Bill. Aloha, everyone.
Hello. Good seeing everybody there.
So you have some items that you want to show. Let's look at those.
All right, let's turn the camera here. So one of the first things is we're planting a giant hemp seed in people's minds. It's obviously a painted coconut. This is from our Hawaiian Hemp Company back in Pahoa in the early 90s. And the idea is in consciousness to plant a beautiful big future of hemp and cannabis around the world. This is one that was painted by an artist.
Raise it up just a little bit. Raise it up there. Yeah, there. Now we can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think you can still put postage on these and an address and put them in the post office, send them out. We sent one to President Bill Clinton with the William Jefferson, the Thomas Jefferson quote on it, because he was named for the president back in the day. And one of our primary documents for the THC ministry is our sanctuary sign, to designate everyone's own home, apartment, mansion, campsite, a sanctuary, a place of refuge for the religious practice of cannabis sacrament. And this concept was invented by me here at what's called the Place of Refuge in Kona. If anybody wants to look it up, it's a spectacularly beautiful old pu'uhonua, or sanctuary. And that concept came from, it's a human concept. When people do wrong, if they can find themselves in a sanctuary and go through a process of confession and forgiveness and redemption, they can build themselves back up to enter back into society without any further punishment.
That sanctuary is a National Historical Park that I've visited several times and have some photos on that through the magic of editing drop in here, I bet. But go ahead.
I highly recommend people go there and see it. That's where I was. I visited one night by myself when I had my camper van and smoked a puff, leaned against a coconut tree, and I thought, wow, what a fabulous concept in human culture that there is such a thing as a sanctuary. And instead of driving away from it and going home, I thought, I want to go home to a sanctuary. That would be the ultimate. So when I got home, I started putting the word sanctuary on a word processor and built this document.
What year was that?
That was probably the year 2000.
Okay, about 20 years ago.
Yep.
But and you've been involved in hemp and cannabis before that. But let's look at some other things you have there. Let's go ahead and go through your collection while you're here.
Well, one of the old documents I have, I think from 1989, possibly, when I was the Associated Press put me on their news wire all over wherever the Associated Press goes.
Raise that up just a little bit. It's way at the bottom of the screen. A little bit higher. Little bit higher. That's good. Now you got it. Good. That's perfect.
So this was when the war on cannabis here was full tilt horrible, and it was the beautiful cannabis hemp plant was getting a very bad rap in the media, and I was the spokesperson here, and I said it spreads aloha, not crime, and it's prohibition that spreads crime. And fortunately, got covered on Associated Press back in the day. So this is one of my favorite old archives, is putting the good word out for the plant. I said here, hemp's the most useful plant on earth, for gosh sakes. How could we miss that? So, it's any right-thinking society would put it as the centerpiece of their agriculture. And let's see. So this is also from back in the day when I was here. Let me find this. I don't know if you could see that well.
Yeah, you need to raise it up more, a little more. Okay, there. Now we can see it. It's kind of this U.S. in pot cultivation.
The isle, the big island.
Yeah.
Would you take that out of the sleeve?
Yeah, the isle. Yeah, leads in pot cultivations.
This wasn't just a place. This
harvest there. was what they was called, right? Operation Green Harvest.
Yes, Green Harvest, Counter Cannabis. It had quite a few names, different iterations, but this wasn't just a place to grow cannabis in the nation. This was the place. According to DEA statistics, more marijuana seized here in 1988 than any two states added together. And that's saying a whole lot. That's the front page of the local Hawaii Tribune Herald in 1989. And then also in 1989, can you see that?
Yes.
That's the former Attorney General of the state of Hawaii, Warren Price, who exaggerated for law enforcement purposes that the pot crop in Hawaii was an estimated 10 billion annual. So even if he exaggerated 10 times, that's wow. It's an economic driver back in the day. And it also was, what was interesting was back in those days, there was hardly any crime. There was hardly any meth. There was hardly any crime. It was very happy days here. And unfortunately, the prohibition came in and that turned things around in a very negative way. And what happened was the anti-pot efforts, can you see that?
Yes.
Created poverty and the meth epidemic here in the late 80s, which still exists sadly today because this state still has a prohibition mentality from the top that really creates a lot of pain and suffering here to this day, sadly, even though we make some good progress.
It's continuing today. Do you have anything else you want to show?
Yeah, this is the report that I found. Can you see the cover?
Yeah, we can't really make out the text much, but we can see the cover.
All right, it says ice and other methamphetamine use, an exploratory study, final report. This was done in 1991 to 1994 by the National Institute of Drug Abuse, NIDA, and they funded what they called a landmark study here in Hawaii. They wanted to know what the heck was going on with this enormous increase in meth all of a sudden in the early 1990s, causing poverty and crime. And this 209-page report concluded that it was the marijuana eradication program that took away the locals' much-needed income and created the substitute factor of meth for cannabis, which was all of a sudden hard to find. And then the study, the only one of its kind in the state, hidden from public view. And so then it's double trouble as far as law enforcement goes. They would hide the study that showed the reasons why we were suffering here such an outrageous epidemic of methamphetamine crime and all the negativities, that go with it. But there was a concerted effort. This is not ignorance. The policymakers knew what they were doing, so much so that when they put out, look at this horrible thing. Can you see this?
Kind of, yeah. It's a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, this is from the government here, Coalition for a Drug-Free Hawaii. And what they're doing is hypnotizing people to use meth. On purpose. This is not ignorance.
What year was that?
2004.
I see.
When we were the number one per capita place in the USA for using meth, and the people were forced in positions of power to look at the causes, and when they found that they were the cause, they hid the study, and they kept the program going, even to the point of hypnotizing meth addicts to drooling over this. Look at this horrible thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's neurolinguistic programming, which is hypnosis with language. Anyway, it's a terrible thing, and they're more than wrong. The policymakers have been more than wrong. They've been complicit in the corruption, and to this day, sadly. Now, this is a study. Hawaii does not have the right to state initiative. We cannot come up with a brilliant idea or any kind of an idea and put it on a ballot that people vote on. It's a
can do it island by island, right? But that doesn't affect state law.
Correct. Exactly right. So I got the bright idea in the late 1990s to buy a public opinion, get a public opinion poll, a really well done one that basically finds, within scientific accuracy at plus or minus 5%.
What year was that? 1990?
1998.
98. Okay.
So thanks to George Zimmer, he was kind enough to fund this, and what it turned out was that
the Men's Warehouse man.
That's the guy. What a beautiful guy. So it came out that 63% of the respondents to this survey supported medical marijuana. And this is 1998. And I gave this report, which is quite thick, very well done by a public survey company from Sacramento. And we wanted it done from somebody out of state. And also they talked about the hemp plant, 59% in favor of legalizing it, 63% in favor of medical purposes. I gave this survey to the governor at the time, Governor Cayetano. 10 days later, he came out very strongly for medical marijuana, and he pushed that concept through the state legislature here. And a year later, the year 2000, we had the very first state law supported by our legislature and signed by our governor on June 14th, 2000.
Yeah, it was the first medical marijuana law that was passed by the legislature to allow patients to grow their own with a state permit.
Got it. And thanks to so many people that had something to do with this, I had a part to play, and this is one of the parts I played.
Yeah, the significant one. And the ball rolling.
Yep.
Do you have any other show and tell items there or exhibits?
Well, yeah, this is a very important one. This was also in 2004. Can you read that?
No, but I'm on the little tiny screen, 2004. What does it say? What does it say?
It's when I sued the on federal court. I sued the attorney.
Bust, right?
I'm sorry?
Is this about your hemp seed bust?
No.
No. Okay.
This was after I had the ministry going a few years. I was getting some publicity for it. It seemed like I had immunity from prosecution. I had kind of won the game in some respects, a First Amendment right to cannabis for myself and all the members of the THC ministry. And I was contacted by Michael Glenn of Honolulu, an attorney, and he thought I had the best chance of winning a federal lawsuit against the U.S. government to secure the First Amendment right to cannabis for religious and spiritual purposes. So he gave me this beautiful lawsuit, complaint for declaratory relief and preliminary and permanent injunction relief. And it was myself and the church that I was ordained in, the Religion of Jesus Church, and Pastor Jim Kimmel, rest in peace, and Tammy Van Buskirk. And we sued John Ashcroft, the former U.S. Attorney General, and Karen Tandy, the former administrator of the DEA, and Ed Kubo, the former U.S. Attorney for the District of Hawaii. And we didn't ask for permission to have a cannabis ministry. We told them we had a cannabis ministry, and we were suing for the right for the federal government to protect it, like they would protect the Catholic Church for wine and bread as their sacrament, etc. So this is a really beautiful, powerful thing. And an odd thing happened during the process. I had a disagreement with my lawyer, Michael, and excuse me, had to dismiss the case. I couldn't use them any longer because of a situation of good manners or bad manners. And so he dismissed the case at my request a couple months later, but he dismissed it so that it could be reopened again at any point in time in the future. Well, this is the future. 16 years later, this case could still be reopened. And although it's super fantastic legal work, and I can make it available to people, but what's even more fantastic about it is I have the government's motion to dismiss. So the government had 30 days to reply, or I won by default. And at the last moment, they did reply in a 37-page motion to dismiss. So they threw everything at me, including the kitchen sink, to stop our progress and to squash this case. Well, shortly after we got their motion to dismiss, I dismissed voluntarily the case. So to restart this again and sue again, I've got all their chess moves in advance.
I see. Okay.
This is a very powerful thing sitting here waiting to be used at the right time. And let's see, what else do we have? You get the concept. This is what Cher and I distribute daily. Can you see these things here?
Yes.
Okay. We distribute this Feed Ya brochure, Who Owns Your Body? This is really important right now because the government claims to own our bodies lawfully and legally, and we say no. The Fourth Amendment is the block to that. The right to people to be secure in their persons against unreasonable searches and seizures, and I'm going to say against vaccinations, shall not be violated. The human right that controls all other rights is the absolute ownership and management of one's own body. Without complete ownership of your body, you cannot hold rights. And so that's a concept that needs to be strengthened as time goes on. That's
of course.
Yeah. And let's see. So we also hand out the Citizens Rule Book. This is a beautiful thing. It includes the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and some other ideas of how to strengthen our security in our homes and our bodies and our lives. And we pass out the jury nullification brochure, which says if there's no victim, there's no crime. And we hand out, because we have these left over from ministry days, we hand out our ministry signature card from the old days because we have a couple hundred left. Excuse me. But we hand it out not so much for the ministry right now as for the blessing on the back.
Yeah.
And the blessing on the back. Can you read that?
Why don't you read it to us?
I'd be happy to. God, that's great. Please show me the blessings in this situation and hurry. We are safe, we are loved, and all is well. Now, this was designed by me after reading Louise Hay and the Metaphysics of Spiritual Healing and reading Serge King about blessing and how powerful blessing is. We know blessing is powerful, cursing is powerful, and we choose blessing. It's easy to bless something that's a good thing. It's more difficult and almost counterintuitive to bless something negative. But we say, please try that on the toughest challenge in your life. And immediately, what it does, it tricks the mind in a good way to affirm that all is well. Because, usually we live in such a way, things are going to be great. Once I graduate or once I get married or once I get the new car or once, somebody gets elected or once, there's world peace. Well, those things are out there and very often, they're complex and they're challenging. So we say to use this affirmation to secure at least one moment where you're living in a state of mental and emotional perfection. And by doing so, it creates something in the mind, I say, that helps more of that to occur. If we say, I am safe, I am loved, and all is well in this very moment, my ears are very happy to hear my voice say that. And it does something for my physical well-being and my emotional well-being. And then it's easier to say that again instead of, well, there's not yet peace on earth, or there's trouble in the Middle East, or whatever. There's all that stuff always going on.
I'll
And
tell
then
you what.
we give out these squeeze lights to all the homeless people and
All right.
shopkeepers that we come across in Hilo.
So those are lights? Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Okay. I see.
so we give people a little comfort. We can't distribute cannabis now, but we can distribute things that upgrade people's well-being. And hey, if it avoids you stepping in a pothole at night, we've helped people's lives because we're ministers. We help to comfort people.
Well, we're here with Cher and Roger Christie on the Big Island of Hawaii. And Cher and Roger are longtime activists. I first met you, Roger, I believe back in January of 1990 when you came to the first marijuana conference and that we had here with Oregon Normal and National Normal. And you stayed at my house a couple of days during that conference.
That was a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a seminal event, Paul. You got a lot of people turned on to activism there.
Yeah, it was the first panel at an academic institution on hemp as well. I was on the panel there with Jack Harrer and a fellow named Jim Evans and Lynn Osborne, as I recall. And it was a long time ago, though. So, yeah. But let's start with the beginning. How did you first get involved in activism, Roger?
It was when I was in the Army. Actually, that was the first time I realized that I needed to stand for something, and I joined the Army to help keep my little brother out of being drafted to Vietnam, and we went in on the buddy program. I had a commercial pilot's license at the time. The Army thought I was a prime candidate for flight school. So my brother and I signed up on the buddy program, and then, which means you go to basic training together. And the last week of basic training, I'm invited into, this is 1970, Vietnam was very hot. Last week of basic training, I'm invited into the company commander's office, and he said, got bad news, good news. You can't go to flight school. We're going to have to send you to spy school to be an intelligence analyst instead of your career path, which was flight training. That's one of the reasons I joined the Army as well, to get free, flight training and to keep my brother from going to Vietnam. So I went to Fort Holabird, which was the Army's pride and joy, one of their spy schools, they called it. And I was trained not as a spy, but as an intelligence analyst to process information, archive information. And during the school, I learned a couple things that changed my path. I was willing to go along, even though I didn't like the Vietnam War. I wanted to help my brother out and get some more flight training time. Anyway, during the school, there was one day where they said, hey, you've got to sacrifice some of your men sometimes during doing this job as an intel analyst in a war situation. And that struck me deeply. Like, I thought we were all for one and one for all. What is this sacrifice your men thing? And they said, yeah, you want the number. You might have to send a platoon over the hill to get some information, count the enemy's tanks or whatever. And they might not all come back. And you've got to be okay with that. And I wasn't okay with that. But I kept going through the school, and it just processed that information. And then I heard that we had ethno-specific biological agents, which was known as Project MK Naomi, which is a weapon of mass destruction in our arsenal, and which I think turned out to be one of them, the AIDS virus. And that stopped me in my tracks. I found this research at the Post Library on a weekend when I was doing some studying for my classes. And I thought, oh my God, this is too dirty, too ugly to deal with. I can't be a part of this anymore. So something changed in me, my morality. It was like an inside bell was ringing, and I could not serve anymore for the military mission once I saw that they were, had these ugly weapons and were using them. So I did graduate the school shortly thereafter and got orders for Vietnam, where I refused to go. And that's a serious crime in the military, obviously, especially during a war. And I was threatened with going to being court-martialed, convicted, and sent to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas military prison for 4 years of hard labor. And that sounded terrible, of course, but I maintained my position. I couldn't, donate one more molecule of energy towards the Vietnam War or the killing machine. So I took a stand, and I found out that if I would sue the Army and put my paperwork on the company commander's desk before the court martial came in, that my effort would block the court martial temporarily and buy me some time. So I was in this Fort Holabird was in right outside of Baltimore, and there was a lot of anti-war sentiment going on in the country at the time. And so I listened to some Quakers who are neutral in times of war, and they gave me some advice, and they suggested that in their eyes, I qualified as a conscientious objector. And they suggested that I fill out the paperwork. Everybody that did what I did had a lawyer. But I filled out the paperwork myself, and in effect, it's not a lawsuit, it's an administrative procedure that I processed through the Army. And I put my paperwork on the company commander's desk saying that I would no longer serve, in any capacity in the military due to my morality. And that did stop the court martial from happening, and I had to go through a lot of interviews and more paperwork and references and things like that. But I eventually won my case, and it was shocking, really, because even with lawyers, people usually failed to become a conscientious objector. And one day I got a letter from the military, it was about 6 months after my application, saying that I had succeeded. Please come to the company commander's office and get your paperwork and get out of here, get out of the military. And I did. I was treated very respectfully and given an honorable discharge, full GI Bill, and free medical for life, which I have, and I use, whenever I need it. The VA treats me great. So it was an amazing success, very rare. And that was my stand against the military war machine the first time I succeeded as an activist in a very heavy duty situation. I mean, it was very tense time, as you may recall, people that were alive that time.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And one of the key factors, I'm sorry.
Said, yeah, going through that would be very stressful.
How old? Let's see, I was 21.
I see. Okay.
I was 21. So I had one last question. Fortunately, my company commander, Captain Davidson, treated me very respectfully, processed my paperwork, congratulated me. And I was about to walk out the door, and I said, hey, one last question, kind of like Columbo, as I recall. One last question, ma'am. How could I, he said, sure, what's up? But I said, how could I possibly win this case? People even, with lawyers failed generally. And he said, well, it came down to one word, and that one word was sincerity. We knew you were sincere, and sincerity has legal value. So have a nice life. And away I went. And I didn't parlay that into more activism for a long time. I just went back to my kind of normal life. And many years later, when I got to the Big Island, I looked back on that success and thought, wow, that was really a big deal. And I succeeded by taking a stand by myself and I won a great victory. And I wonder if I could do the same in the war on marijuana. So that's 1986. As soon after, a month after I got here to the Big Island, I asked myself, I'm in a new place. I've never been here before. I don't know anybody. What's the best thing I can do here? And I just have fun telling this story. I was interviewing myself to find out what could I do that was unique and just for me. And so I had a puff or two and thought, I wonder what it could be. And then I looked at the joint one time and thought, wow, there's a war on this plant. There's a war on the cannabis culture and the people that love it. And this is ground zero. The Big Island just coincidentally happened to be ground zero in the nation's war on cannabis at that time. And here I was looking for a unique position. I didn't want to compete with anybody. I wanted what Spirit, God, the great you name it, put me on earth to do. And I became committed to being an activist, actually to be an intelligence analyst in the war on marijuana, but not for the government, for we the people. So that got me sparked here. Well, I'll send you that article later. It says the Big Island was the ground zero in the nation's war on marijuana at that time.
Yeah, I think you showed that to us in our previous taping at the park.
Yes. So that got me started as an activist, and it was a great success. And I got to tell my truth to the big bad government, so to speak, and be respected and actually rewarded for doing so. Most people don't have that kind of experience. And it was partly my mom told me manners maketh man. She said, have good manners no matter what you do. She said, good manners will open doors that battering rams can never open. And so I had good manners to the company commanders, even though I was pissed at, the president and the war on marijuana or the war in Vietnam, etc. I had good manners and respect for my so-called opponents, and that helped to demonstrate my sincerity to the opposing team, so to speak, towards the military chain of command that doesn't want to let people out of the military during an armed conflict. That's for sure.
So your sincerity there led to them recognizing your status as a conscientious objector. And
Correct.
so eventually you transferred that concept to cannatheism, or the belief that cannabis is a special plant, a sacrament. And I believe you tie that into Christianity as well.
I'm born into what we call the Judeo-Christian society, and our government comes from Roman history and ancient Israel and the Ten Commandments, etc. I wasn't big in Christianity, but when I got to the Big Island, Pastor Jim Kimmel from Maui sought me out. He saw me in the newspapers, being kind of a lonely voice in those days to stop the war on marijuana here. And he flew over to meet me, introduce himself, and he said he was running a church called the Religion of Jesus Church that used cannabis as their sacrament. And he would like to have me join and speak to the members and have fellowship with them. And I had never I didn't know what a sacrament was. I thought of cannabis as a very special thing. But he gave me the entree into religious use of cannabis, and I'm so glad he did. He didn't. Pardon me?
Where is he today?
He has passed into hopefully the heavenly realm.
When did he pass?
He passed away on Maui about 5 years ago.
I see. Well, probably we haven't got to this story yet, but I really want to examine it in depth. You were in federal lockup as someone who the local judge there in Hilo said was too dangerous to the community to be released. And so let's talk a bit, though, how that came to be.
you open, I visited you many times when I was seeing patients there in Hilo with Dr. Thomas Orvald primarily, but sometimes
Right.
Dr. Rabia Ahmed as well, or other doctors. We would come there and help people get the blue card in Hawaii, the medical marijuana permit. And so at that time, you had a storefront on the waterfront in Hilo, in the Moses building of all things. And I know you anointed Dr. Thomas Orvald and myself a couple of times, I believe. But tell us about how you came to open the office there for uh and what was it called?
The Hawaii Cannabis THC Ministry.
Right. So how did that start?
Well, the sincerity came through again to help me, fortunately, in good manners. After I was a member for about 7 years, excuse me, in the Religion of Jesus Church, they invited me to become ordained and go from being a practitioner, which just practices the religion, to a minister, which comforts others. And so I accepted that ordainment, and they said, it's common that once you're ordained, you apply to the state of Hawaii for a license to marry people. And so I did. And on that license application, which was free, and suppose this, at that time it lasts for life. They've since changed it, I think, because of my success with it. But I remembered back to my Army days. And you'll remember this, and people our age will remember when contracts used to be in writing. And the day my brother and I went into the Army in October 1970, we went to the place where we were going in, and the sergeant gave us a contract to sign and date. And most people, it was thick and full of legalese, and most people signed it, dated, and then 2 minutes later, they're legally, lawfully in the Army. Well, I asked the sergeant, could I take some time and read this thing before I sign? He said, of course, which I did. And back in those days, contracts in writing, and maybe ones in writing today, had a blank space on the back page that said comments or other. And it was blank. And it was your opportunity to put something new, to an addendum, an addition, an amendment to the contract. And I remember at that time thinking, hey, this is an opportunity. I don't like President Nixon, what he's doing, and I don't like the Vietnam War, but I'm going in anyway. Maybe I should put something in this blank space, which I did. And it was something to the effect that I'll be happy to serve honorably as a soldier as long as the president tells the truth to the U.S. people about the war in Vietnam. Well, President Nixon was known as Tricky Dicky and a big fat liar of many things of life and death importance. And so I put that statement in the blank space, and I initialed it and I handed it in. Well, it turns out that's a key element of a contract. A contract is an offer plus an acceptance equals a contract. And sometimes they go back and forth where people scratch things out and initial and add things in and initial until both parties are satisfied. Then you've made a contract, which is very serious business, in the world, in commerce. Well, when I applied for my license to marry people in June of 2000, after being ordained, on the application, it said simply what's my name, address, what church am I part of, and what's my denomination or sect. And in that blank space, I thought, hey, let me tell my full truth like I did back to the Army. And I put Cannabis Sacrament very clearly there and I mailed it in to the state. And I got a call a few days later, and a nice woman from the Department of Health says, Mr. Christie, we have a problem with your application. And I'm thinking to myself, you probably do. I put cannabis there. And she says, no, that's not the issue. She said, you left your title blank. I said, I'm not really into titles at this point in time. Can we just leave it blank? And is everything else okay? And she said, that'd be fine. The First Amendment's a beautiful thing. So what the state of Hawaii did was, with me, we made a contract they accepted my offer of being a cannabis sacrament minister, licensed to legally, lawfully marry people with cannabis as a sacrament. So that started my unique legitimacy as a cannabis minister.
What year was that?
It was June of 2000, the same week, excuse me, that Governor Cayetano signed the medical marijuana law in Hawaii.
I remember we were talking about the polls that you had done to help push that through with the governor. So that was a critical time right there. And of course, once there was a medical marijuana law, that's why I started coming to Hawaii again. And when I joined the Army, in 1979, part of my contract was I would be stationed in Hawaii. And so that's where I was stationed there. So I knew Hawaii a little bit, but I was anxious to come back and start helping patients. But I heard about your ministry. And so share, when did you and Roger first get together?
Well, I had met Roger the first week I was here in Hawaii in 2000.
Uh-huh.
But it just wasn't the time, you know, it just, so we had seen each other a couple different times through the years. He had seen me in a bathing suit with a wheelbarrow when I worked at a beautiful property called Shangri-La that since the lava has taken the whole uh, area of Kapoho. And then I had seen, and he got my card, which said Aspen on it the first week. And that's one of our favorite places on the planet.
Yeah,
And
he's from Colorado. So were you from
in
Colorado as well?
No, but I had spent a lot of time in Colorado. I lived in Vail at one point, skiing, and Boulder was one of my favorite places, and did some work there, feng shui jobs and things there. But it was, and then I saw Roger probably about 2004, and he was with another woman, and I was at a party, and he was so attentive, like he is now. He just holds, you know, he's always opening the doors, and I just went, I want a man that treats me like he treats this woman. And so that was planted. And then in 2008 or 2007, our neighbors got arrested, and there was a fundraising for them for
It was
cannabis.
just a marijuana arrest.
It was a marijuana arrest, Grey Wolf and Devaki, and there was a beautiful event. And I donated. I was doing water shiatsu, Japanese massage in the warm ponds, and I donated a couple of treatments. And I heard Roger speak, and I just remember a long time ago that, you know, this comment that in general wouldn't so much apply to today's world, but that women hear and men see. And I just, when I heard him speak, I went, oh my gosh. I was just so taken by what he had to say.